In this video, you will learn how to calculate percents using the proportion method. Before we begin, let's discuss why are there some percents that are greater than 100. Since a percent is a part out of a whole, percents can be greater than 100 if the part is greater than the whole. If you have more than what the total is, for example, on a test due to a bonus point or anything like that, you can have a percent greater than 100. We will also, in this unit, look at other scenarios where percents can be greater than 100. Today, we are going to learn how to solve percents using a proportion. There are many methods to solving percents, and this is simply one of them. We will learn another method, and we will also discuss other possible methods you may have learned in the past. In order to write a percent proportion, we want to use this formula to help us set up and then ultimately solve for the missing part of the problem. When setting up a percent proportion, we are going to put the part over the whole and the percent over 100. It does not really matter which side you put the part and the whole and the percent over 100 on. For example, you could take this whole left side of the proportion and put it on the right, or vice versa. What's important is that the part has to represent the percent and that the whole always represents 100%. Regardless of whether the part is bigger than the whole or not, the whole always represents 100. Let's take a look at this first example. What number is 37.5% of 484? If we're using the percent proportion, the part goes over the whole, and then the percent over 100. In this example, the percent is 37.5, so that goes over 100 because all percents are out of 100. Now we need to decide whether the 484 is the part or the whole. In this case, it is the whole. We are trying to determine what number is a percentage of something. When something is a total or a whole, we take a percentage of that number to find the part. So your proportion would look like this. When we solve this, we solve it just like we would solve any other proportion. We can cross multiply 484 times 37.5, which is 18,150. And then we also need to determine x times 100. What number times 100 would also equal that same value? So we're going to divide the 18,150 by 100, and that gives us an answer of 181.5. Let's take a look at this next example. 24 is 120% of what number? Again, this case we can easily identify the percent since it has the percent symbol, and that will go over 100. Even though it is above 100, we are still going to put it on top. Now we need to decide whether 24 is the part or the whole. We're trying to calculate what number 24 is 120% of. That means it is the part, and the whole is what we are trying to determine in this problem. When we solve, we will multiply 24 times 100, which is 2,400, and then 120 times something also has to equal that 2,400. To figure out what that has to be, we will divide 2,400 by 120, which gives us x equals 20. One thing you can do here is stop and think about whether your answer makes sense in the original problem. Since we know that the percent is greater than 100, it should make sense that your part here is bigger than your whole. If you got a 120% on a test or quiz, that means you would have gotten 24 points out of 20. If you got an answer for x in this case that was bigger than 24, then that probably means that you had the problem set up wrong with the x on top and the 24 on the bottom. So in this case, the 24 represents 120%, which is why it has to go on top, because it says 24 is 120% of something else. And for our third and final example today, we have 4 is what percent of 5. In this problem, we have the percent is what is missing. So instead of having a percent over 100, in this case we have x over 100. When I am writing the other part of the proportion, it's asking 4 is what percent of 5. So that's like saying 4 out of 5. So the 4 is the part and the 5 is the whole. And then we solve by multiplying 4 times 100, which is 400. And 5 times what number would also give us 400. We have to calculate by dividing 400 by 5. And so we get x equals 80%. Make sure if the question is asking for a percent, you give a percent. If the question is just asking for a number, you just give a number. Here are a few practice problems to try on your own. Here are the answers to these 3 problems. Feel free to pause and go back and try them again. Here are 3 word problems that you can try also using the proportion method. Here are your answers for these 3 problems. Just as a quick helpful tip, I will show what the setups would be for each of these. So for this first example, it says there's 90 students at the football game from the middle school. So that's 90 out of the 300 total students that at HMS, which is not accurate, but in this problem, equals x over 100. So 90 over 300 equals x over 100. For question 2, there are 60 total questions on the test. How many would you have to get correct to get an 80%? That would be x over 60 equals 80 over 100. And lastly, we are calculating the gas mileage in the city for Mrs. Heller's car. And the highway is 28 miles, which is 125% of the city mileage. So that's 28 over x equals 125% over 100. I know that the highway goes on top with the 125% because it says on the highway she gets 28 miles per gallon. This is 125%. So the 28 is 125%, which means they have to be both on top of the proportion. Here's one last practice problem for you. If you got 11.5%, you would be correct. First thing you would need to do is add up the total number of bottles. In this case, 54 plus 110 plus 46 plus 132 plus 58 is a total of 400 bottles. We are trying to calculate what percent out of 100 are the bottles of Great Grape. So that's 46 out of 400 would give us 11.5 out of 100.